this is Dr. Katie, and we are here today for a live session of What's Up Doc. Today I have with me Dr. Shane Bateman. He is an incredibly busy man, and I have locked him down for this afternoon. And I just was going to get him to introduce himself as we start.
Perfect. Hello, everyone. My name is Shane Bateman. I get paid mostly by the University of Guelph as an emergency and critical care specialist. I'm a faculty member in the Department of Clinical Studies, and then I also practice in emergency and critical care in the Health Sciences Center at the University of Guelph. So that's my paid gig, and then I do a bunch of other things in the animal welfare sector.
Yeah, and we are so excited and so thankful that you've joined us for this segment. When I went to school at the Ontario Veterinary College, I worked very closely with Shane in community veterinary outreach, which was a very important part of my veterinary career. Maybe just as we start off as like a background info, can you tell us a bit about community outreach and what your role in it was?
Sure. So community veterinary outreach was born, I guess, of sort of an emerging recognition of social justice issues in the profession. I think we realized, or many people at the same time had this revelation that veterinarians were not doing a great job of access to care and a lot of other things with respect to animal welfare. So community veterinary outreach was an amazing charitable organization that was founded in Ottawa by our great colleague Michelle Lem, and it provided free preventive medical care for the pets of people who are unhoused and who are experiencing housing insecurity. So it was a lot of fun, and I got to know a lot of students over the years.
Yeah.
We did some great work, but it became almost like a second full-time job for me.
Yeah, I don't doubt it.
And so the veterinary college was the very amazing recipient of an $11 million gift from Kim and Stu Lang in 2019, which created the Community Healthcare Partnership Program. So now a lot of that outreach work and education, we've developed a whole curriculum now in the college that starts in phase 1, where students start learning about the issues around equity, diversity, inclusiveness, access to care, and all of the challenges associated with addressing that issue within the profession. So it's pretty awesome. We were able to hire some great people, and now that's a permanent part of the veterinary curriculum, and it's doing great. I've stepped away from the front lines of some of that work, but keep my hand in a little bit of the research in the back end, and there's occasionally a knock on my door of, hey, Shane, we have this issue. What do you think about this? So, yeah.
And I think it's so important that you've brought it back now to be something that all students have to participate in, because it is such a huge issue in the industry. And in general practice, you face access to care concerns every day, every appointment sometimes.
Absolutely.
And it gets to be very challenging, I guess.
I think it's a really, I think those of us who've worked in the field for a long time recognize how much of a burden that is on our mental health and our professional identities sometimes. And so I think the more that we can do to bring the profession back to the reason we all joined the profession in the first place was to be able to help people and animals regardless of who they are, what they look like. We get to meet them where they're at and be able to be that supportive, guiding professional that was so popular, right? I mean, veterinarians at one point in time were like the most trusted professional above so many others. And I think our relentless focus on improvement and quality improvement and trying to get veterinarians paid well for what they do, which is also important. But I think we have to really do that hard think of like, do we really want to be there if it's killing us to get there?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I totally agree with you. And you're right. It is like quite a burden when you're in clinic and you have to deal with it, especially if you work in a low cost
Yeah.
area where people just really can't afford care. Like I've had times where I've had people come in for appointments and that's all they can afford is the cost of the appointment, but the dog is sick.
Yeah.
So, I work on a production-based model.
Yeah.
I waive the cost of my appointment, right? I give them meds because why wouldn't I, right? Like, but
And you go home and sleep at night.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's the trade-off
Yeah.
that we have to find, that sort of fine balance of, how much of that work can we do reasonably to make a practice still be financially successful and all of our teams get paid a living wage.
Well, exactly.
But how do we also serve our community at the same time?
Yeah, I 100% agree. Well, I mean, that has always been a big part of like my heart and my passion in practice. But jumping to another kind of interesting aspect of the field that you guys have just developed in at OVC is the forensics course that I heard about, and I wanted to jump into before we get too caught up. I could go on probably for an hour about access to care.
Yeah.
Maybe next episode.
For sure.
So yeah, you want to tell us a bit about forensics?
Absolutely. So this was never something that I envisioned on my, similar to what we talked about earlier today when we met. And she's like, this was never part of my career plan, is to be part of a startup and start ScribeNote, right?
Yeah.
So same thing. I didn't envision myself ever. I mean, I loved CSI and I loved, getting into those kinds of popular media. And I mean, very interesting for sure.
Yeah.
So I'd always had an interest in it, but I never thought that that would be a part of my career. In 2018, I think I was at Humane Canada's Violence Link conference in Toronto, and Dr. Melinda Merck, who's sort of one of the grandmothers of veterinary forensic science, was a speaker, and she very eloquently laid out, that both the veterinary profession, the animal welfare profession, the law enforcement professionals, social welfare and social workers, we all have this collective desire to want animal welfare to exist at a higher standard and higher level. And she really, was a call to action. If we want it to be better, we all have to do better.
Yeah. And
that means people have to step up. And especially, she said, veterinarians, we are far behind, right? We're in contact with the most number of animals on a regular basis. We see this kind of stuff every day in our practices. And yet we're not sure if, when, how, what do I do about this?
Yeah.
It's a real ethical dark space for people.
Yep.
And so at that moment, it was just like this flash for me of like, I have a really privileged position. I have an audience of students. It's the biggest and oldest and one of the highest ranked vet schools in the world. There's a captive audience who I think I can influence, and potentially, that's a role for me to take on. So I, right there at the conference, looked up, like, how does one get involved in forensics? And I learned that there's really only one place to do your studies at University of Florida. It's a distance-based coursework or thesis-based master's program.
Oh, interesting.
And I knew that I had a sabbatical leave coming. And so I did one course just to test the waters and make sure that, Bateman's old brain was still worthy of going to graduate school and that I could keep up with the youngins. It went well, and so I enrolled and completed my coursework-based master's.
So cool.
During the year that I was off on sabbatical. So, it's a great course. It gives you a really strong theoretical foundation in the work and the business of veterinary forensic science. I think it equipped me pretty well to be able to teach people about the issues and support them in many of these things. But I've always believed, as you experienced of me that to really be an authentic teacher, you have to be immersed in the work as well.
Yeah.
So since graduating with my Master of Science degree, I've started to build build up a few areas of the curriculum at OVC, and including an elective rotation now that's offered for 2 separate weeks in their final year.
Cool.
It's pretty cool. I'll talk about a bit more about that in a second. And sort of kind of that was my first building block. And then more recently, I've started to try to get more involved in different investigations and kind of build some of that more authentic, real life experience. So yeah, I've been excited to get involved recently in a pretty high profile investigation, and that's been really, really interesting. And the elective rotation was offered for the first time this past year. It went really, really well. We tweaked it a little bit after the first iteration. And this past offering of the rotation, we actually created a mock crime scene for the students to investigate, gather evidence. They took that information forward and sort of used it as part of a mock trial that we had at the end of the week. So students had experience in, testifying as an expert witness in a courtroom type environment. Yeah, it was really great.
Really unique.
Yeah.
So our co-founder Emily took your rotation, and that's where I heard about it. It's on our first episode of What's Up, Doc. That is something that I think I would have loved back in school. We watch Forensic Files, all the time. And I'm sure it's not as glorified as the TV, though.
No.
Lots of really deep.
It's hard. It's hard work.
Yeah, and like some pretty, I'm sure, challenging things that you see.
Yeah. And we talk about that in the rotation as well, and how important it is to protect yourself. And if you want to take on much of this as a part of your career, then it's really important to invest in your own safety and personal health as well.
Yeah, for sure. I was curious as to for regular practice, general practice veterinarians, like what steps can they take if they have concerns at this point? I know there were some changes with regards to who is in charge, and I think there's a lot of confusion there. So what steps do you recommend?
It's a really confusing landscape for sure. The models of how animal welfare is investigated and enforced across Canada are quite different.
Yeah.
And so it's so important for veterinarians to be aware of, who in my jurisdiction is involved.
Right.
For those of us in Ontario, again, there's been some pretty significant changes in that. The model has shifted from a charity based where investigations took place because kind-hearted people donated to that organization and that animal welfare was important to them, and those charitable gifts were really how investigations were undertaken, and it moves off into the criminal justice system where the Crown Prosecutor will take those cases forward. So in Ontario now, all of the animal welfare inspectors that were employed by charitable organizations and the OSPCA and all of its affiliates in Ontario have now been employed, and that workforce has been expanded in Ontario through the Ministry of the Solicitor General. So they are all provincial employees, peace officers, very similar to the Ontario Provincial Police. And they're all, again, housed in the same ministry in Ontario. So the recent change in Act empowers all of those folks, plus every police officer in Ontario, including police officers that are hired and work in First Nations communities, to be able to investigate and lay charges under the Act.
Wow.
Which is good. So if you're in practice anywhere in Ontario, you can either call the PAWS hotline 24/7, or if it's out of hours or in difficult time periods, or there's a real urgent need and that service is backed up, then the backup is any police officer.
Okay, good to know.
Now, many police officers don't necessarily know that they have powers under the
Right.
act. And so you may, in fact, have to educate them a little bit about their role. And basically, they just need to apply everything they've learned about evidence collection and laying charges and doing an investigation
Mm-hmm.
to this particular situation. So,
Yeah. So exactly the same as they would for
yeah.
a human crime scene. Yeah.
So I've recently started again to try and get my investigational skills up to speed. A private consulting business outside of the university called Nine Lives Veterinary Consulting Services.
Very cool.
Yep. So, and I have a consulting service. So if there's a veterinarian or a police officer or anybody else within the system that has a question and needs a pretty quick response, I do a 30-minute free consult for them. So,
Wow. You're amazing.
doing what I can.
Always. And more. Probably.
Yeah.
Well, that's amazing. I'm really glad that there's been a lot of changes there because you're right, there's so much, I think, confusion and like uncertainty of well, who to call, what
Right.
to do,
Yeah.
if you even should do anything.
And I think that's the other really hard part for veterinary. Again, we don't get taught this in
Yeah.
school, and
Like lots. Yeah.
the science is evolving, and there are some more recent publications and evidence that helps us to understand more of some of the patterns, or when you have a bit of a concern or suspicion, here's some more questions that you need to be asking in the family or of the family or the people who've brought the animal in those situations. Right. And it's really, again, it's just like CSI. There's not a like smoking gun oftentimes.
Right.
It's more or less about building together a pattern of circumstantial evidence that helps to sort of tip the scales per se.
Right.
And what I teach the students now is the moment you feel that more than 51% of your brain is saying there's the possibility that this is a non-accidental traumatic injury or that there's an abuse situation here, then I'm obligated to report. I think the other huge mental leap for all of us is that because the work that we do, we're like a bloodhound. We're like, I need this piece of evidence. I need this lab work. I need to be convinced that this is the diagnosis, right?
Yeah.
And so I think we take a lot of that experience and apply it to these kinds of situations. And we often feel that we need like a smoking gun before we can feel confident to sort of report. I think in our minds, we have to think, oh, I have to be sure that there was abuse before I can report it. And in fact, your obligation isn't to know for sure. It's only for you to have a suspicion based on what we know, right? It's more or less, what are your spidey senses tingling, telling you, right?
Yeah, for sure. That makes a ton of sense.
So, yeah.
What about in like socioeconomic kind of issues where, maybe people don't have access to care and it took them a long time to come in and like, maybe the dog is like extremely matted or things like that. Like, I feel like that might be a gray zone. Like,
so I think what you're picking at here is sort of the difference between abuse and neglect.
Right.
And abuse tends to involve causing significant harm, often over a short period of time, often related to the violence link, probably in many circumstances. But what you're talking about is more or less that there's a longer standing, not an act of commission, but an act of omission.
Right.
And often it's related to inadequate access to care.
Okay.
And so provided that you are in a family where they have desire to want to do better, oftentimes it's about education and then reaching out to other agencies that can lift that family up and provide some of the support that's needed in those moments. And so I think if you're in a practice that's really serious about doing a good job of access to care and spectrum of care, then when that family comes in, you have 3 or 4 people that you can call who also have the same belief system and are on that same page, that you're like, hey, I know that you run a small business and doing a groom for free is not what you had planned today, but I'm wondering if you could help this family out, right?
Yeah.
And so it's about building up your community in those moments,
Yeah.
and recognizing that that investment in your time and social capital in those moments does so much to help people believe and trust in the veterinary
Yeah.
profession again.
That's
So,
always been my take on it as
mhm,
well. But I think that sometimes like people can put blinders
yeah,
on and they can automatically think like, this person is
yeah,
neglecting their animal on purpose. But
yeah,
you just really have to take a step back and understand there's so many factors that play into,
yeah,
even, shame, right? Like
totally.
it becomes like a spiral.
Yep.
So yeah, really with
S-
regards to those resources that you
Yeah.
said, would those be like people could look them up per area or
Yeah, we don't really have a great system in Canada
yeah.
at this point in time of like, hey, I need this service. Where can I find it?
Hmm.
One of the sort of pilot projects that we've sort of put on ice for the time being, but we investigated a little bit was similar to yourself, is thinking about how um, digital, the digital age, and that there's so much that artificial intelligence and those kinds of things can be put to bear on problems like this that can
Hmm.
really help create elegant solutions. So we envisioned the opportunity of having, an app or an online community
Yeah.
where veterinarians and groomers and pet stores and anybody who's involved in the pet industry per se could play a role. And
Right.
so you just do a reach out to the community, and again, you know who's in your geographic region.
Yeah.
It's kind of like speed dating in some, or some of
Yeah.
the dating apps that, right,
Like a
swipe right,
hotline
swipe
kind of,
left,
yeah.
for helping people to find those kinds of resources in their community. And again, so much of our focus is on capitalism, and there's no way that we're ever going to leave capitalism behind.
Hmm.
But can we soften the edges of capitalism and allow other ways of thinking about value
Yeah.
and valuing people in our community
Yeah.
could coexist alongside of the system of capitalism? And so thinking outside the box about a bartering system or a time banking system. So if I decide, hey, this is a family that I've met, they're lovely people, they're doing the best they can, I want to support them, I'm going to spay their dog for no charge. And I'm going to say, great, I've contributed 2.5 hours of my professional time to this. And if that person joins this time banking community, then they would need to give 2.5 hours of their time back to some other cause in our community that helps to build somebody else, right?
Hmm.
And that eventually that all comes around. I think
Yeah.
it's a really useful tool. And, we're starting to see some businesses sort of think about not just the bottom line, but also their social capital within the
Yeah.
community and their social standing within the community. And so, is it possible to, for an organization or for a business that, is really proud of that work and wants to highlight it, that they can feature that on their social media, and
Yeah.
that there's a verified process here of them being able to say, yeah, our hospital contributed, 150 hours of community service that created a whole amazing amount of value. And here are all the stories that tell us about how important that
Yeah.
contribution was to our community. I think if we can start thinking about the world and what our place in the world and in our communities is,
Hmm.
I think there's some really tangible benefits that can come from that. So
Yeah.
I don't know. We obviously weren't well funded, and you know kind of had some ideas of where it was going to go, but I haven't given up. I think there's some real value in that concept, or some of those concepts and
Hmm.
ideas, but um, we need a good funder to come forward and
Hmm.
invest in um, ideas like that.
Yeah, there is, I think, a huge opportunity there.
Mm-hmm.
And like that to me, when you're talking about that, I'm like, oh, I want to do that. I want to be
Mm-hmm.
involved in
Right?
that. Like, like, it's just such a hard profession,
Yeah.
right? Like, it's, one you get into because you love animals. Like, people come along with those animals, and then, you just have to deal with all this really challenging stuff every day. And it becomes a lot. It like takes a lot from your bank, right?
Yeah.
So, like, to fill it back up, like to
Right.
give the community, like the veterinary community, a way to build themselves back
Right.
up in the eye of the public and
Right.
and in them of themselves, right? Because if you just like, it just keeps emptying your cup,
Right.
like thing after thing, right? It just gets to be a lot. So
It's totally different from somebody who drives home from work, having had to turn that family away because that's the bottom line and that's not how we do the work that we do anymore.
Yeah.
And the empty feeling you have to take home with you, that go to sleep with it, you wake up with it the next day, and it accumulates over time.
100%. Yeah.
And so instead, and in my world with my
I
rose-colored
live there too.
glasses, to think about driving home and if we were able to build an application or a community like that, as you drive home, that the person that you helped has gone to, the senior center and volunteered their time. And there's people as you drive by that center on the way home that benefited because of your generosity, right?
Yeah.
That's a totally different feeling when you go home at night.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. I'm on board. We're gonna get it done. So switching gears a little bit more now. I know we talked a little bit about school and our forensics course. You also have a new program at the Ontario Vet College, the ECC Bootcamp.
Yeah.
So you are board certified
Mhm.
emergency critical care specialist.
Yeah.
Which took how many years?
4.
4 extra
Yep.
on top of vet
Correct.
school. And from there, you are now head of department of, or were?
We're a strong team. We actually, although like somebody has to go to the meetings, I think the 3 of us feel very strongly that we divide our responsibilities and we kind of co-lead.
So there's 3 of you at the OEC
So
right now.
Alexa Bersanis and Siu-Ting Yu, who are the 3 emergency critical care specialists.
Yeah.
We're like our own little family.
Awesome. And the ECC Bootcamp, you guys are pretty proud of that?
We are.
Tell me about it.
Yeah. So we've had, the college conducts a, employer survey and graduate, hey, how's it going once you graduate?
Yep.
Right. So a lot of that post-graduation feedback informs us a lot of, how ready how prepared are our graduates to go in day one and do the work that's expected of a professional in veterinary medicine. Right. And there's still a huge gap there that we are all struggling to know how to effectively fill that, right? The profession has completely exploded with respect to the diversity of what you can do as a professional. The knowledge in each of those areas is completely, the amount of research. So to keep up to all of that is enormous. And as a consequence, the curriculums across the world in veterinary science have exploded. And I don't understand how a student today, compared to what I had to learn in vet school, I don't know how they do it. And it is an exhausting, annihilating process to go through vet school because there's just such a massive information and colleges are so focused on, well, if we teach it, we have to assess it. And that means everything we teach has to have a quiz or a test to prove that, you got the fact and you kept that fact, right?
Yeah.
So we're so focused on that aspect of things that I think we've really neglected some of the experiential aspects of what we do, right? There's certain courses like the Art of Veterinary Medicine and others that are focused around some of these non-professional and also professional technical skills. And so we were guilty of that in emergency and critical care. Again, colleges like OVC are at the forefront, right? There are skills and techniques and equipment and diagnostics and research opportunities and clinical trials that are available there that are not available at any other referral hospital.
Mhm.
And so our teaching caseload is not very practical anymore, right?
Yeah.
to some degree, right?
Yeah.
Students are never going to see some of the cases that come into ICU and that we're caring for 3 or 4 days at a time.
Mhm.
They're never going to be able to do that in practice. And so we really needed to, students can learn and from observing and experiencing that, but it doesn't really prepare them
Yeah.
for day one practice. And so our solution to address some of those things has been to create another elective rotation called the ECC Bootcamp rotation. It takes students out of the clinical environment into a safe space. There's no pressure, there's no clients, there's no consequences to making a mistake or to learning a skill in the moment as you go,
Right.
or practicing it again and again and again until you can feel like you have it a bit more perfected.
Yeah.
And so within that boot camp week, we spend deep dives in some of the sort of major body systems like cardiology and respiratory and neuro and bringing in some of the more common emergency case scenarios and using simulation equipment as well as skills building opportunities and just trying to bring all of the pieces of the puzzle together and applying them in a practical, again, safe learning space for students. So we kind of just iteratively do that through the course of the week. And then on the Friday of the rotation, all we do all day is like a case-based simulation where there's a group of students who are being, told this is the patient and here's the information you have now. The patient gets hooked up to all of the monitoring system and we get those feedback coming through on a monitor so they can see it in real life and be making those decisions around, okay, should I give antibiotics to this patient? If so, what kind, which one, how much,
Right.
how often? Should I give fluids? How much, how fast, for how long? How am I going to know when I'm done giving fluids?
Yeah.
All of those kinds of like basic skills that come in stabilizing an emergency situation.
Yeah.
So it's about taking those common emergencies and just sort of trying to pull the pieces together for us. In the long run, again, so we ran that rotation 3 times for 10 students each last year. So we had 30 students from the graduating class who completed both their core rotation in ECC as well as the boot camp rotation. I actually have a summer student just started on Monday who's going to be looking at some of that data. We've encouraged all of those students to consent to enroll in this pedagogical study that we're running to try to decide like what was the impact of that
Right.
for them. We hope to develop and convince everybody to participate in a focus group again in 6 months' time once they've been in practice to sort of see like, is there a difference
I'm sure
between
there will be.
students who did the boot camp and who didn't do the boot
Yeah.
camp? So, and we're already now planning for sort of the next step, which is to say, okay, based on what we've learned this year, we are finagling and conniving to have students complete their core rotation to begin with, then do the boot camp. We're going to make the boot camp a 2-week rotation.
Yeah.
And the first week is simulation based. And then the second week would be having them parachute into a regular emergency practice within the region, potentially having, clinicians in that practice sort of teach them the tricks of what they do and how they do it, or at least showing them those things, but also having that sort of umbilical cord still to OVC, and that one of the faculty will still be able to round with them on a daily basis and kind of, keep that learning progressing.
Well, that sounds amazing. I want to do that course. I honestly, while you were saying it, I was like, this sounds like something that probably even newer grads who weren't able to experience it would love to do for CE, right? Like, nothing really prepares you except hands-on experience. Like reading about something does not make those things click, right? So,
and I think a lot of people graduate thinking that they might be interested in emergency practice, but never get the courage to take that leap and to test their waters, right?
Yeah.
And so, our focus is on our students to begin with, but if we can pull that together and perfect that, and that's going well, it certainly has been something that has come up in our conversations about whether or not this could be something that practitioners would be interested in.
Yeah, or even teams, right? Like get them used to running, like being able to offer things at a general practice level, which I think a lot of, general practices don't always feel like they're equipped to deal with things like, and then you potentially have an access to care issue right there, right? So if I can do it at my hospital and I'm comfortable doing it, I don't feel like I necessarily have to refer you for $8,000 of hospitalization that these clients don't have, right? What a great program to just start that ball.
And so it's things that we've taught. I mean, I think within academia, we've had this real revelation that, yes, we practice at a gold standard or a high standard, right? Let's get rid of the world gold. We practice at a very different standard. We have access to a whole bunch of other things. And when we have clients who have the means or insurance to be able to take advantage of those, that's wonderful. But that's not everybody. And so I think we've done students a very strong disservice by having them leave thinking that that's the only way forward, and that we haven't done a very good job of helping students to understand how to do those things in their own practices successfully, and to take the satisfaction home at the end of the day of we fixed that and we got to send it home, and that family was incredibly grateful. And without what we did, they couldn't have afforded it.
There was no alternative. Right? Yeah. I think that's amazing. I think preparing, students for the real world is a big component of having them feel more confident and be able to maybe not have so much imposter syndrome coming out of school, and also maybe not being so hard on themselves when things don't go well because they knew they were equipped and did as much as they could, right? So all super important things.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, it has been an amazing discussion, Shane, as always. And I wanted to thank you again so much. I think everyone will be really interested to hear all the wonderful things that you are doing for, the future generations of veterinarians, and also in your new forensics endeavors. Again, I'm so thankful that you came and joined us today. And I think we'll wrap it up there, guys. So we'll see you again for the next episode of What's Up, Doc.
Thanks for the invite.